So, story tonight, New Zealand homeowners facing an average rates rise of 15%. Actually, TV3 News Hub did a much better story on it than TVNZ. I'm not biased one way or the other. I tend to look at both because they give out a whole bunch of facts and figures right at the start, which I think are really pertinent. And I've actually been speaking to a local body politician this evening to try and get a bit more of an understanding about this. So let's have a look.
Homeowners, brace yourselves for an average rates increase of 15%. That's worked out by economist Brad Olsen, who surveyed 48 councils across Aotearoa. And when you break it down further, that is an extra $416 a year, which Olsen says is a stark illustration of the cost pressures councils are under. For example, in the last 3 years, bridges have become 38% more expensive.
Before we do anything else, just looking about this, see that word there, water? And that word there, sewerage, that's 2 out of 3.
2 of the 3.
2 of the 3. And remember what all of the mayors said who are against Three Waters. They said no to government control. But none of them then told their voters, and because we're saying no, and we're going to have to pay for it ourselves, your rates are going to go up. None of them said that. And 2 out of the 3 things that are costing significantly more would have been taken off councils' hands, the costs for them, by central government if the racially charged, lying, far-right groups hadn't tried to convince the nation it was only about iwi getting all control. So just be aware, look at the screen if you're watching. If you're listening, trust me, it's here. Bridges, sewage, that's a pipe. Roads and water, that's a pipe. So 2 out of the 3 waters are the most expensive increases
to build. Sewage systems 30% more costly, and road and water supply costs have gone up 27%. And yet the council's share of tax revenue has remained at 2% of GDP for 50 years. The government...
So this is real interesting. And as I said, I was talking to a local body politician today, and he made the point to me that the reason this really hurts local bodies is that, especially if you're in a place like, and he mentioned Ruapehu, I guess you could probably say Rotorua, you could probably say Taupo, those places that are tourist meccas, that the local rates can't pay for the extra million people that come through. So that needs to be paid by central government. And this model here of a flat 2%, yeah, okay, it's proportional. So if it was out of 1 billion, it would be one thing. Out of 100 million, it would still be proportional. But this needs to change. And I think there's a case to be heard, Jeremy, that if you are one of these tourist hotspots, that the government needs to figure out a way to proportion some of this percentage to places that have 10 times their population come through. So 1/10 of the number of people in that city or town for that year have to pay for all the infrastructure getting through that same year. I thought it was a really interesting point.
It is a really interesting point, and I think I actually think you can extend it a little bit, which is that a lot of, I mean, that slide you just had before, that News Hub just had before, when you're talking about something like roading, for example, there are a lot of roads in this country that do not just benefit the people who live in that council district. You know, I live in Auckland. There are certain roads up here, the road to the airport being a prime example, that it's a benefit. It's of national interest. It's a benefit to the whole country, or it's certainly to the whole economy. And, you know, we're not alone in that, in the same way that having an extra million people in Rotorua or Queenstown or wherever actually benefits more than just that region, because most of those people aren't just going to be spending money there. The money goes nationally. So I think that percentage, there needs to be a redefinition of what councils are responsible for and what national government is responsible for.
Yeah, I'm going to look that up as well, because you've just mentioned Rotorua. I'm going to have a look up while some of this is playing, just out of interest, how many tourists visit Rotorua per year versus how many ratepayers there are. And I think, I mean, like, I haven't done that research yet. I think it was a pretty obvious stat that the person gave me, and I think it's a really interesting way to start thinking about this. Maybe something from the tourism sector needs to be funneled to those cities. I don't know whether that will be a levy at the airport or something, so that they can actually have a proportionate number of bodies per year paying for their water or their pipes as that many people are using them, not just the people who live there permanently. Interesting thought.
Local government rates shown in the blue at the bottom there. Local Government Vice President Campbell Barry says it is no secret that the funding system for local government is broken. Simon Shepherd reports.
What poured into the water at Parnell in Auckland is probably how ratepayers are feeling about the tsunami of rate hikes.
We are at a tipping point. We need to do something, because if we don't, it's only going to get worse.
Councils are preparing their long-term plans to work out how to pay for a local government infrastructure deficit of $51 billion, a deficit that keeps on growing. Over the past 3 years, the cost of building a bridge like this has gone up by 38%. Roads, sewage, water has all gone up by about 30%. All of these increases way above the increases in cost of living. Which is why eye-watering increases are on the cards. Bulla District Council leads the way with 31.8%. For the major centres, Auckland's the lowest, followed by Christchurch, Tauranga, Wellington and Dunedin. But the biggest hike goes to Hamilton.
The context around that is Hamilton's the fastest growing metro city in New Zealand right now. As you can see from this, we've got a lot of growth going on.
These proposed nationwide hikes are even bigger than last year's 10% average, and they were the largest in 20 years.
I think there's a lot of councils that demonstrate that they're spending money on nice-to-haves, have racked up debt, and now the chickens are coming home to roost.
Sure. This is not your frilly nice-to-have projects at all. We've stripped those right out.
Local councils say relying on ratepayers won't fix the funding abyss. They need other ways to raise money, like a share of the GST collected by the government. And the infrastructure pressure has ramped up again with a revised record net migration figure for last year of 141,000.
We either invest in that, or again, we have to at some point either turn people away or give them a worse quality of life.
Which nobody wants. Simon Shepherd.
So, very quickly, now, why the fuck was Jordan Williams on there? What's this got to do with taxpayers? It's a ratepayers thing.
Well, you see, this is the problem. Is it goes back to what I was saying? Is that this is the problem. I'm being very ardent about this, but we're not in many cases. It's not about nice to haves. Speaking from Auckland, a lot of the projects that have pushed. One of the reasons Auckland has the lowest rate hike this year is that ours have steadily been going up for the last few years. We've had reasonably significant hikes because of some major infrastructure, the inner city rail link, various developments, infrastructure. They're not nice to haves. We don't have a lot of the nice to have. Would have been nice to have a waterfront stadium. Would have been nice to have a second harbour crossing by now. Would have been nice to have all that stuff. All that's gone on the back burner because we're paying for the stuff that is necessary, that really is necessary. And certainly not alone. I mean, that certainly covers so many parts. Hamilton's a great example. Christchurch, Dunedin, all these centres are spending money on things that cities need as we grow. And I think it's time that, people took a good hard look and went, these cities need these things, but not just for the people who live in these cities. These need them so that the national transport network functions properly, so that you can take a flight to somewhere and be in a city without, being stuck in roadworks for 4.5 hours at peak hour or whatever. I'm exaggerating, but not by a great deal. So screw the taxpayers union is what I'm saying. They're always it's like, I'm just waiting for the comments to come out about Atlas because it's an Atlas product. Maybe, I don't know. So doing the numbers, Rotorua has 3.5 million visitors a year, and the infrastructure is being paid by a population of 77,000, of which 30,000 are ratepayers. Yeah. So 30,000 ratepayers is paying the infrastructure for 3.5 million. So that sharing of GST or some kind of levy. Look, there's always conversation when a tourist gets lost in the bush, right? And there's a big scale to go, a massive about
scale.
Who pays for it? Yeah,
about who pays for it. Now, there's been talk about, if you're going to book a walk and you do it through DOC, there's a $20 fee, and that kind of pays. Why can't there be something for tourists in New Zealand, and that can be divvied up proportionally or something? The other thing about these rates. Sorry, you go. GST is a reasonably straightforward one for something like that. Have a share of GST for somewhere like Rotorua, because 1 million people buy stuff that has GST on it. It sort of seems fair enough. Yeah. Maybe a little hard. And I think the thing we haven't quite touched on to do with rates at the moment is that the rates rises that we're seeing now is based on decades of mayoralty candidates not putting up rates. It's based on decades of ratepayers associations, of old, stingy, land-owning white men and women going, well, I don't want to fucking pay any more than that. And so they haven't. And so what's happened is it's all been lumped on us. And the person I spoke to this afternoon, I haven't asked if I could use their details, so I won't, was a fairly high-profile politician who was honest about where their town was at and was honest about what it would cost and got voted out. So to get elected on a message of, hey guys, the city's rooted and we're going to have to raise rates significantly to get it under check, that person's not going to get elected. And if you get elected going no rates rises and then you raise rates, then you're not getting elected next time. It feels like that it's not fair that those of us who weren't ratepayers 50, 40, 30 years ago are now having to cover it. But that's the reality. I sometimes think about the foundation we have, right? And the foundation we have right now is that these things need to be paid for. So we've gone past the point of bitching and moaning about this is not fair. You're right. It's not fair, right? If you've bought the house and 3 years later one of the walls falls down, you might go, well, it's not fair. I don't want it. The last people should. Well, it's too late. You got to fix the wall. We got to fix the infrastructure in our towns now. We got to pay for it, and we got to have some honest conversations, especially from mayoral candidates, saying, guys, I know this is hard, and I know this is not your fault. This is from a generation ago, but rates are going to have to go up by 20% for the next 5 years or 10% for the next 10 years, and then we'll bring them back again to cover these losses. But they just won't do it. They just won't do it, and this problem will continue.
It ties in with, the other ongoing problem that we've had specifically in local body politics for decades is looking short term, is planning short term, is what is going to be the legacy of my 3 years in office or 3, 6, 9 years. What is my legacy going to be? And no one wanted to go, well, my legacy is going to be, we built that second harbour crossing, but rates went up 30% over the course of the 9 years I was there. That trade-off, we're paying for that now, on both sides of the ledger.
Yep, and of course the people that do that, you remember, everyone's heard of the phrase Mayor Robbie, or you've heard of, building of the state housing system by prime ministers. You hear that probably people like Helen Clark will get continue to get thought of because they built their legacy on working for families and interest-free student loans. That'll continue on. But yeah, if people are in it for a quick buck or for a little bit of profile to then go join a board on Air New Zealand, then they probably only think about what they can do in the next 3 years, 3 to 6 years.
It's unfortunate that think big has become a sort of unfortunate phrase in New Zealand politics because, that is actually what we need people to do. You do need to think big. Think bigly.